Anyway, good evening, everybody. I'd like to welcome you tonight to today's talk on ancient Egyptian civilization and its impact on the world today by Dr. Fayza Hailkal, our renowned Egyptologist. This talk is the fourth in a series of distinguished speaker lectures organized by the group Daughters of the Nile. The talk will be in English as announced, but if you want to ask your questions in Arabic at the end, please write them in the chat. الحديث النهارده كله بالانجليزي، لكن اللي عايز يكتب الاسئله بالعربي يتفضل اهلا وسهلا. My name is Taysir Abu Nasr and I'm a retired engineering professor and dean. As one of the Daughters of the Nile, I'm very proud to be the one, it's my pleasure and my honor to be the one to host you tonight in tonight's special event with Dr. Fayza Hailkal. I'll be moderating the session, but I thought before we start to let you know, all of you, that we are recording the session. We will be posting it on the Daughters of the Nile YouTube channel within a week or so after the event. Two of the other talks that we had before are already posted there. To start with, I'm just going to ask, before we get to Dr. Fayza, I'm going to ask Dr. Samia Spencer to introduce to us the whole initiative of Daughters of the Nile, to give us a brief idea of where that came from. Dr. Samia Iskandar is an Egyptian, of course, from Alexandria. She spent most of her professional career as a professor of French at Auburn University in Alabama, US. Her research focused on women in the French Enlightenment and women in politics in France and in Quebec, Canada. In recent years, she turned her attention to women in Egypt, including the early feminist movement. She is the recipient of way too many institutional awards to mention, and she has been honored by the governments of both France and Quebec in Canada. It's my pleasure to introduce Dr. Samia Spencer Iskandar so that she can give us an idea about the initiative of Daughters of the Nile, for those of you who are not familiar with it. Dr. Samia?
Good evening or good afternoon, depending on where you are. Thank you, Taysir, for inviting me to tell you about the idea behind Daughters of the Nile. Please forgive the breaks in my voice as I speak. They are due to a medical condition, not to being nervous. Actually, the seed for the book was planted shortly after the uprisings of 2011 and 2013. Egypt was all over the place in the North American media 24/7. Women appeared among shouting crowds, looking frantic and uncivilized. Journalists and commentators tended to describe them as illiterate and uneducated and dwelled on their status as victims of rape and police brutality, deprived of freedom and dominated by men. It was outrageous and humiliating to see so-called experts provide misleading and biased information about us. Why was the attention directed exclusively at this particular group? Looking around me, I saw different women, unlike those popularized in the media. I saw remarkable professionals in every field: educators, doctors, engineers, entrepreneurs, economists, to mention but a few. Why have they been ignored and disregarded? Why has the focus been on images of Egyptian women that perpetuate arrogant attitudes and obsolete Orientalist cliches? I was angry. I was very, very angry. However, instead of letting my resentment and indignation prevail, I decided to turn negative feelings into positive action. I could take a small step to offset the barrage of disdainful press by highlighting a set of Egyptian pioneers and groundbreakers who would narrate their own stories in their own words to explain how they have enhanced the quality of life in the societies in which they live and work. It was also my purpose to recognize their successes that are rarely reported beyond their own environments. Furthermore, I wanted to provide to the younger generations of both sexes inspiring role models that would motivate them to follow their dreams, overcome the problems they will encounter along the way, and convince them that the sky is not the limit. The project could not have been achieved without the unwavering support and staunch determination of many friends. Together, we joined hands and identified 38 professionals ranging in age from 28 years old to 92 years old, half of whom reside in Egypt, the others in Europe and North America. Ours was a labor of love. Royalties from book sales were to be entirely given to charity, one half to Banati, an organization founded by pediatrician Hannah Abulghar, and the other half to the Zeppelin, the Association for the Protection of the Environment, created by social scientist Marie Assad. All of us hope that our modest initiative would encourage others to follow in our footsteps, because there are many more treasures to be uncovered and many more extraordinary Egyptian women to be honored and recognized. Our findings were simply astounding, and what followed totally unexpected. But that's a subject for another presentation. Today, I'll stop here to let Fayza Hailkal tell you about her brilliant achievements in Egyptology. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Dr. Samia. Now it's my pleasure to introduce our distinguished speaker, the renowned Egyptologist, Dr. Fayza Hailkal. Dr. Fayza is a professor emerita of Egyptology at the American University in Cairo. She received her BA in Egyptology from Cairo University and her PhD in Egyptology as well from Oxford University. She started her academic career at Cairo University teaching for many years before moving to AUC in order to establish the Egyptology program over there. While at AUC, Dr. Hailkal lectured intensively in America, Europe, the Far East, and in Africa. She has been a visiting professor at a number of universities, including Charles University in Prague, La Sapienza, Roma, as well as Paris 4 à la Sorbonne. In addition to her research and publications in Egyptology, Dr. Hailkal is particularly interested in ethno-Egyptology and in the impact of ancient Egypt on today's national and international culture, which is the topic of our talk today. She has numerous awards, too many to mention. I'm just going to list a few of them over here. She's a member of the Institut d'Egypte since 2007. She was nominated as Woman of the Year in 2015 and honored by the Egypt Exploration Society in England and the Ministry of Antiquities in Egypt. She is an honorary life member of the International Association of Egyptologists since 2019, Knight of the Star of Italy in December 20, and she was honored by the British Museum in 2021 for her contributions in publishing the British Museum documents. Dr. Hailkal is going to give us her talk today in about 50 minutes or so. And then afterwards, we will have a commentary from Dr. Hourig Sourazian, hopefully with us. And then at the end, I am really hoping to have at least 20 minutes for questions before we close. Dr. Hailkal, it's our honor and pleasure to have you with us over here. Please go ahead.
Oh, thank you very, very much for your introduction, which is very flattering. Thank you. And I hope that I shall be as brief as I can to put as much as I can in the time you are allowing me. So I'm talking tonight on ancient Egyptian heritage and what is ancient Egyptian heritage, as a matter of fact, and how did it affect, firstly, modern Egypt, and secondly, the whole world. The heritage in any country is either tangible or intangible. When I speak of tangible heritage, It is what is created, what you can touch, what you can see, what you find in archaeological sites or temples and tombs in the sites or in museums. And this is the responsibility of the Antiquities, Ministry of Antiquities, and it is often accredited by the UNESCO. This is not what we are speaking about today, but I want to just say that this tangible heritage is the manifestation or the materialization of the intangible heritage, the ideas, if the religion, a lot of things that we are knowing through what is written on the walls of the temples and tombs. All this is very important, and this is what we're going to talk about today. In addition to that, there is the intangible heritage, which we cannot touch, but we know about. It is produced by the environment, like language, belief, superstition, literature, music, social organization, social life, etc. And then there is something I shall speak about the cult of the ancestors, because this is one of the essential things which links us very closely to the ancient Egyptian. And also very, very briefly, presentation of sanctity and the saints in ancient Egypt, and then a number of superstitions and other ideas that you are going to see and I hope enjoy. Now, in addition to Egyptology, the impact of Egypt in the world is done also through Egyptomania. Now, what is Egyptomania? Egyptomania means taking ancient Egypt as a source of inspiration for all cultural creation. It started in antiquities, essentially with the Roman occupation of Egypt and transfer of Egyptian artifacts to Italy during when Egypt was ruled by Rome. It then expanded all over the world because of Egyptomania and its allowance for endless fantasy. Ancient Egypt is present in today's daily lives through architecture, arts, music, literature, etc. And I hope I shall have enough time to speak a little bit about it a little bit more when I am done with speaking about ancient Egypt. Now I am showing you here, you have a map of Egypt, which of course I don't intend to teach you what is Egypt like, but it is necessary to know how Egypt started. And this is why I got the map of Egypt, because in prehistory, long ago, 10,000s of years ago, people were living in the deserts before they came to the Nile Valley. And they came to the Nile Valley when there were droughts in the world, a little bit like what we are seeing today with the global warming. But anyway, people had to go closer to the river, and therefore they came from Africa and they came from the East. And this is very important to remember, because it is this mixture of population coming from Africa and the East, which created a language which is called and belongs to the group of Afro-Asiatic languages. So there are, not all the roots are the same, but it is, a lot of them are Semitic, coming from the East, and a lot of them are also African or Nilotic, coming from the West. So this is why I'm showing you this map. Now, the language of Egypt, sorry. The language of Egypt, of course, started, and I want to just tell you, to put you in the historical background, that we talk about history of Egypt only when we have written history. Before that, we call it prehistory. And written history began in Egypt around 3,000 and some years before Christ. That is to say, a little bit over 5,000 years today. Of course, the civilization existed before, but it was not registered. And it existed for very many years. But I just want to tell you that from this time, the state of Egypt already existed from about 3,000 years. It's when the writing began to develop a lot, and when the state, the whole of the Nile Valley, was unified into one state. So we are also one of the oldest states in the world, if not the oldest. And from that time, we have until today the name of cities which have not changed. And this is very also talking about the impact of ancient Egypt. We still call Damanhur, which is near Alexandria. Damanhur is the city of the god Horus. In hieroglyphics, you would call it Demi, means city, and of, and Hor, which is Horus, the god Horus. And Aswan is the place of exchange. It's called Sulu, which is Aswan. Asyut is the protectress, Fayum, Payam, etc. So I'm just giving you samples because of time constraint. We have personal names also, which date from ancient Egypt, and some people do not know that Susan, for example, is not a Western name or even, although it appears in the Bible, it is not a Western name or even a Semitic name. It is an ancient Egyptian word, which means lotus flower. And in hieroglyphics, you would say Sheshan. Nefertiti, the beautiful one, has come. Isis, Ramses, all these are names. Pahor, Shenouda, Beshay, all these are names which have meanings in ancient Egypt. And it shows again to you how the continuity exists, not only in the name of places, but in the name of cities. We have now many words which are purely Egyptian, not Arabic, not Semitic. And for example, just for example, I'm giving you Shona, for example. El Shona in the countryside means the place where you are putting the granary. It's a granary. And it is an ancient Egyptian word, which means in Egyptian, it's called Shenu, the same thing. Boundary. If you have any idea of the countryside, they use word Tash. Tash means a border or boundary. And it's very common in Upper Egypt. It's less common in the Delta, but it is still there. There is word like to spit, tef or tef. In Arabic, you would say basaqa, in literally Arabic, but this is not the case. We use in our dialect this word. We use also barash for farash sigada, for example, etc. And then many words like, for example, Egyptian words like buri, it comes from buri Egyptian, it's a fish. You have mabarbar, when you tell babies or little kids who have running nose, mabarbar also comes from Berber hieroglyphics. And words are very common. For example, everybody knows nafar. Nafar comes from ancient Egypt. Is a recruit or somebody until today that. A towel to wipe yourself is futa. Futa is ancient Egyptian. Things that normally you don't think of as ancient Egyptian, but they are. Then we have expressions, and we have the Coptic months are still in use in the Coptic calendar, and the Coptic calendar is still in use. If you take a journal, a newspaper every day, you will find 3 calendars in Egypt: the international calendar, the Islamic calendar, and the Coptic calendar still in use. So you see, we have all this coming from the past. We have now, all these words were purely ancient Egyptian, and now we have, I show you just a few which have Semitic origins, that is to say that they are like Arabic, very similar, like Waha. Waha is Wahat, it's an oasis. Jaba, the fingers, to calculate, Hasaba, يحسب. Flower, waret, الورد, اسمها waret, and simsim, and so on. Samir, for a companion, etc. So it goes on. And just for an example, I want to tell you, for example, if you want to say somebody is greedy, he says, عين كبيرة, عين واسعة. For example, I find this one that when my non-Egyptian colleague translate or see things in that kind of expressions in the text, sometimes they do not know them because they don't know Arabic. It becomes more difficult to translate. There are many words which have been not reused as they are, but translated. For example, if we are going to the cemetery, to go to the cemetery in hieroglyphic, it means to go up or out to the cemetery, because the graves were usually high up in the cliffs. And in Arabic, we translate the spirit into tal'a, al-tala, tala ala al-amwat, which means exactly the translation in Arabic into of an ancient Egyptian word. Same thing when we are taking offerings to distribute in the cemeteries. We are these offerings which are distributed on behalf of the dead and which were distributed to the dead in the past are called rahma. Rahma hatepu is the word in Egyptian, which means rahma. So sometimes it is a translation, sometimes we use the same word, and sometimes the expression can be a little bit different. For example, if you say samna al-asal, anybody who knows Egyptian means that it means Arabic good relations between people. Humma zay samna al-asal. When you say this in front of non-Egyptian, they usually don't understand what it means. Zay al-amar. For example, if I say like a moon, nobody knows that it means to be beautiful. Like a moon doesn't mean anything. So I'm just telling you all these are all the language. Now we're going to get into the body language, the games that people are playing. You see, for example, here you have a game which is called Hazza Lawizza in the countryside. As far as I know, this is the name I was told. You have the kids here. And you have it here, it's in ancient Egypt. You can see that it's a relief from the Saqqara tomb, and you have the modern one here. So games, nobody is teaching them to anybody, but the children invent them, and they keep on passing them to each other. The tahtib, what we call tahtib, the sports with a stick, is still done, and it is still done today, and it is very important. And you know that this today has been picked up by an Egyptian French now, because he lives in Paris, and he developed it into a modern art, martial art, and it has been acknowledged by UNESCO, and it is accredited by UNESCO as intangible heritage of Egypt. Now I show you how the peasantry, of course, in the countryside, it's much clearer. You see, for example, the thing he's making he is turning the earth so that it's aired. Mahrat, it's called in Arabic. And here you have exactly the same in ancient Egypt. And now they use machines, but in ancient times they did not. This is making bricks. Making bricks is also the same thing as today, making bricks with the same tools. Look, this is the tool. And the brick in ancient Egypt is called jabet. And this jabet has become al-jabet in Arabic, the jabet. It became adobe, al-tuba, and it's now al-tuba in Arabic has become adobe, and adobe is now used in Western languages. And particularly because it went with the Egyptian to Spain, with the Arabs to Spain, and with Spain, it went also to Latin America. You have this, you see, it's exactly the same block, which is using, and the same mixture of earth with straw in order to make it stronger. It's exactly the same technique as ancient Egypt, and it is still done until today. Look at, for example, the attitudes or the body talk. Look at this is, of course, these are statuettes in wood from ancient Egypt, and these are human beings today. You see the attitude and how they're using and still carrying things on their head. Not anything, even the shape of what they carry is the same. Look at that. People are wailing and mourning their dead, and you are getting into what becomes more and more frequent the analogies are more and more frequent between ancient Egypt and modern Egypt. And it's amazing to see that really. Here you have the sarcophagus in which the deceased is placed, and they're taking him to the necropolis in ancient Egypt. And here is the same thing in modern Egypt. Here it is not even very far from Cairo. And the architecture even of the tombs is very similar. I do not think that there are so many places where you have houses to bury the dead, like houses in which you live outside of Egypt. Now, also from the things which are very ancient in Egypt and we have until today, is the idea of the weighing on a balance of the soul of the deceased to see whether he deserves to go to paradise or whether he is going to be devoured and his name will not exist at all forever. So this is something I'm very proud of, this weighing of the soul of the deceased, the knowledge that there is a soul and there is a weighing of the soul and there is hell and paradise. All this is in Egypt much before it happened anywhere else. Now, something which is very interesting is what we have here. You see, this is a statuette in wood, and this is a letter written in hieratic, one of the scripts of ancient Egypt. And this is a letter, sorry, it's the same thing here, but written differently, another letter. This is a letter that somebody is writing, a man is writing to his deceased wife. So he's sending her a letter to tell her, please, you have been dead now for a long time. When you were with me, I treated you very well. I was a very good husband. I did everything you wanted, etc. So please let go of me. Let me live my life now. Don't block everything I'm doing like that. As if she had such power from the other life, from the other part of life, in the realm of the dead and the divinities. So he's writing to her a letter. And this is not the only case. I mean, we have many, many letters to the dead. This is another case. And either it's written on papyrus and put into the statue that you just saw, which has a box under it, or sometimes written on pots. And all these are containers of offering that are presented to the dead as offering. And what I showed them to you for one very simple reason, which is that until today, we have people writing letters to the dead. And of course, these are neither Islamic tradition nor Christian religion. It is Egyptian tradition. And when they are writing these letters to the dead, they expect also to be answered by different ways. Now, here, what we have here is, for example, to continue with the interaction between the living and the dead. The living will tell them, if you don't do this to me, if you don't protect me from other people, I will not give you offerings anymore. So there is a kind of trade between the two, between the living and the dead. And then we have the same idea written on the doors. Here it is in Arabic, as you can see, on the doors of houses or tombs, essentially. And we can see it here. We have in Arabic a book called خطابات الأموات للشيخ, sorry, I forgot the name, but it will come back to me. It's very here close to Cairo. Sayed Awais wrote a whole book and made a study on the current letters to the dead. And these letters to the dead are either put in a mausoleum or something, or sometimes when people go visit monasteries, they put it in the frame of icons. So they have their ways of reaching the person they want. Now, you see, for example, here, these are very similar to the letters to the dead as well, and to the inscription that I showed you in Arabic, because this is not only letters to the dead, but also the dead are responding on them, on the living, by saying, when you pass before my tomb, I am a Mr. So-and-so, and I am a respectable person, and I did good in my life. So you should recite a prayer on me, and recite the prayer, which is, you see, if you can see well, you will find أيها الزاهر إلى القبر فقل كذا وكذا. So there is a kind of dialect, but it's all written because they cannot talk together, so they write to each other. And we have it today, and we have it whether in Islamic cemeteries or in Christian cemeteries. So it's the same thing. And we have also the same traditions of visiting the dead or our ancestors and presenting now not to them, but on behalf of them. In ancient Egypt, people were presenting to the dead themselves because they thought they would need to eat that sort of stuff. But now we know they don't, so we are presenting in their name to the poor people around their tombs. And you see, for all this is ancient Egyptian, now this is modern Egyptian, and they are going to do exactly the same thing, presenting flowers and presenting offerings to their dead, putting the flowers on the tomb, and even sitting and eating, sharing with the people who are buried very nearby. This is the house of, which is the tomb, really, there is a tomb inside, it's called al-Hosh. And this is the wealthier people, these are the poor people who can have a grave here nearby, but they have no problem sitting and eating with their ancestors and sharing the food. And normally, I'm sure that you have people who remember their childhood in Egypt, have maybe memories of that kind of thing. But I remember personally that the kind of offerings and the bread, and particularly the bread, was very specific. And it had names, it was named Shorek, Araish, etc. These words are ancient Egyptian words. So we have things and we are not aware where they come from, but they come from ancient Egypt. And as I say, they would suggest that we share with eating, so that we would eat a piece of bread, of this kind of bread, you know, bread with 3 branches like that, a little bit sweetened, something very special. Now you see Hosh al-Hajj Inawi, this is obviously his Inawi Muhammad, Allahu Akbar, oh, this belongs to an Egyptian, this is the entrance to his grave, and this is a Christian entrance to the grave, but they do the same thing. Now I'm showing you this one because there is all the offering which is presented to the divinity here, but what I particularly like is this very, very charming, in my opinion, woman who is now visiting the cemetery. And if you know of open air cemeteries in the countryside, you will find that they are very similar to that until today. Now, I will not speak very much on the cult. This was the cult of the ancestors, done then and done today. And whenever we see until today, if you see a procession of a person who died, you usually say Allah yarhamu, and you recite the Fatiha like it was asked on the stele or the writings on the tombs of ancient Egypt. Now, but in ancient Egypt, there is a very important phenomenon, which is the cult of the saints. The saints in ancient Egypt are individuals who had a lot of powers, and they are the equivalent of the saints in Christianity and the awliya Allah al-salihin in Islam. They have sanctified places. People go to their places, and they, at specific dates, which are considered the feasts of these saints, and they have murids. I shall not speak about all that in details now, because it's too much, and it would require the whole lecture. However, I will show you, this is the beginning of the ancient Egyptian places. This is the saint that they decided he was a saint because he was a good man, and he served them, and he was a philosopher or a medical person, and these persons are respected. Here we have the same idea. For example, this is Babzuela, and near it there is a saint who is called Tawadros, and he is healing people. Many of the saints are healers. And these ancient Egyptian saints were known by their names, and they were revered for a very long time. Some have been revered for thousands of years, like Imhotep, for example, the architect who built the tomb of Zoser. And others are less long-lived. One thing which is very important with the saints is their capacity to move everywhere, their capacity to have barakah, and the place where they go is blessed. And the place itself remains blessed for a very long time. For example, here we are in the center of, in the temple of Luxor, and you can see the temple of Luxor here. And that was one of the greatest temples in Egypt of the god Ammon. And after Christianity, after ancient Egypt religion died away with the coming of first the Romans and then the Christians, and then the Christians, these places remained sacred, the place itself. And therefore, above the temple, on the same ground, there is a Christian church, and above the Christian church, there is the minaret and a mosque. So, and there is a wali who was called Abu al-Hajjaj, who was buried there, and the rituals done at his munat are exactly like the ancient Egyptian rituals which were done for the festivals of the god Ammon. So this is very interesting. And now I'm showing you the Mary Girgis procession, the celebration of Mary Girgis, but we have the same thing in Islamic bullets, and people are touching them because they have barakah, and you want to take the barakah, they touch anything that relates to the wali or the saint. You touched it and you get the barakah from it. And this is the Sayyida Zainab, and during her festival, they have a lot of prayers, a lot of enjoyment, a lot of things which are done. Now I'm going to show you some of the superstitions that existed from ancient Egypt, and I can prove to you that they come from ancient Egypt, because this one, which is very comparatively recent, the photo was taken before 2011, a few years before, and there was a kind of demonstration in the streets and manifestations against the government, and they were going to a mosque to sweep the floors, يكنس المسجد على فلان, sweeping the floor of the place and directing all the dirt that comes off the floor or all the malign spirits who are there, they wipe them away and they throw them in the direction of the people they want to harm. And this comes from here. You see there is also a broom, and like the one that they were carrying. And after the king offered the offerings to the divinity, to the god in the shrine, he would wipe away, and here is again, you see here the same idea, wipe his footsteps and everything away, any trace of human spirits or human malign souls or genes to go away, in order not for them not to come and steal the offering. So it's the same idea of protection of a place and taking away all the bad thing away from them to another place. I'm going fast because there is a lot of things to say. And here you have the same idea. You see here you have the room. And this comes from the idea of after a funeral to break things and throw them away with, so that death does not come again. So mummification tools and all of that have to be removed so that they do not appeal to death again. Here are the things that they break, breaking the pots. And after somebody has visited you. And until today, you will say in Arabic, somebody who is visiting and staying too long will tell his guest, his host, don't break the pots behind me because I stay too long, in other words. So this comes again from the idea of you break a pot so that this person doesn't come again. With the brooms they have, until today, sometimes I know that they put it in their houses and behind the door with a blue pearl or something, because if they have a guest they don't like it, they are afraid of the evil eyes, so they wipe again the things after he leaves. So all these ideas come from ancient Egypt. This is also one of very important things from ancient Egypt. It is called in Arabic, Tasit al-Khadda. Tasit al-Khadda means the bowl of the fright. You know, in Egypt you have this, and people, if they are frightened, they say, toof, 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 toof. Certainly you've seen your servants doing that. And but what happens is that it is written with a lot of verses, either from religious writings or a little bit magical writings. We don't know what they mean. And they put water on it, and it makes a kind of magical spell, which will cure the person from the fright or from any psychological ailment that they have if they drink it, or if they wash with it. And to wash with it, you need more space and more water. This is a modern Tasit al-Khadda, where you can even wash your body in it. And then there is a whole ritual of how to do it and where to throw the water, etc. Modern and ancient. Here, this is exactly the same thing. The idea from this ancient Egyptian, this is called the Shipi. This is a statue with religious writings on it, magical writings on it. You pour water on it, and the water comes and it's put here, like the tasa, like the bowl, and then you take the water which was here, you see, and you either wash or drink it according to the need of the time. So we exactly know where it comes from, and we know it. This is another story also about beliefs and superstitions of people believing that we have a double, qareen, or that we have an ukht or an akh, which is living under the ground, ukh and akh, or sister or brother, which are identical to us, but they live under the floor, under the ground. To the extent that you have to put things like that so that they do not come upon earth and harm you because they are jealous of you being up and they are being down. So you are propitiating them by doing that kind of thing. And there are sayings in folklore where if a child, for example, or even a bigger guy falls, they will say, Ism Allah alayk wa ala akhuk illa ahsan minnak. I don't know if you have heard about that when you were living in Egypt, for people who are not here, but I think many must have heard it. This is protection of the entrance door. Same thing as they protected in ancient time. They take real crocodiles, which are dead, and then stuffed and mummified, and they put them on their doors to protect them. Now we are passing to literature in ancient Egypt. There is a very nice piece of literature which is called يا طالع الشجرة هات لي بقرة تحلب وتسقيني بالمعلقة السين. المعلقة انكسرت، يمين يغذيني، رحت بيت الله لقيت رسول الله بيحشي في حمام أخضر. So there is something called le théâtre de l'absurde, absurd, but because if you, how could you get a cow from the top of the place? Of course, it's totally impossible, except if you know ancient Egypt, and if you know that the cow can feed the king, particularly because she's a divine cow, and the divinity goes to the child by means, or to the king by means of the milk the king is drinking from the cow, and that this divinity can also be represented as a tree, and when she is a tree, she feeds the deceased in the other life and his wife. So it's all echoes from ancient Egypt which have been put together, and if you trace them back, you can recognize them. If you cannot, you cannot. We have also a very interesting, you see, this is papyrus from the Cairo Museum, and you can see here a green bird, al-hamam al-akhdar, and this is a human-headed bird. And in ancient Egypt, it represented the soul of the people who were born with them, because it's their soul, and who stayed with them until death, and then it would go out of the body, but not leave him, not abandon him, but continue to exist. And I am sure that you also have heard about birds who are sacred, and who out of the sacred birds came the idea of the pigeon or the turtle who is announcing the sacred people, sacred creatures. It is the Saint Esprit, the Holy Spirit. And you have it here, you have it here, you see, and there are interesting stories about the Virgin appearing, but in Shobra, in Zaytun, again, for lack of time, I should not go into the details, but you see, for example, the announcement that the Pope is here is through this is a true story, it's true, it's not made up, through these white pigeons. Now, the idea of the birds is because the birds fly very high, so they go towards the God and in the realm of the afterlife. And this is why people until today think that the birds are very important. And they can fly, and so can the wali and the good people. Among their characteristics is that they can fly, and that when these people are buried, sometimes they will tell you al-nash al-ta'ir, that is to say the flying bear, and then the bear can push the people to run or to stop or to do what they want if the deceased is a very religious person. Sorry, until here we have the belief in the importance of the birds is very clear in Egypt. We see this is Fatimid art, and you find it in the museum, Islamic Art Museum. And here you find the souls of the people who are eating and drinking water like the people who do themselves. And here, this is the zir, and the water which is dripping from the zir is kept here for the animals and particularly the birds to drink. Now I'm going to very, very quickly, 5 minutes of Egyptomania in Egypt. While in Egypt, Egyptomania has the privilege to be something that reminds Egyptian of their identity. If you want to represent Egypt by anything, you will not use a church or a mosque, because you find churches and mosques everywhere in the world, but you do not find Egyptian artifacts. So Egypt, the identity of Egypt, when they want to show it, is ancient Egypt, is pharaonic Egypt. You see here, for example, this is the first parliament of Egypt under King Fuad. And you can see here, this is all pharaonic architecture. And this is on statue from the Cairo Museum of King Khafra. And it is, again, here it is the same place. And somewhere else, but I don't have the slide here because I had to cut short, the name of the king is written in hieroglyphics. Now this is King Farouk rest house at Giza Plateau, and he is represented as a pharaoh, and his name is written in cartouches, in pharaonic, in hieroglyphics. So now in modern Egypt, the identity of Egypt, when they wanted to commemorate the dead of 1973, they made a pyramid, modern pyramid, inspired with the names of Egyptians from Hanna to Muhammad to Girgis to Abdelhadi to whatever. Okay, this is the identity of Egypt. More than that, I don't know. When they had to do the famous tribunal, the higher court near Maadi, I met the architect, and he told me when I presented my project, they said this does not look Egyptian enough. You have to add something to make it look Egyptian. So he added unnecessary columns and decoration, which looks Egyptian. Last but not least, during the manifestations and the graffiti paintings, this is Ala Awad. Whenever they want to express their own feeling and their own identity, they go back to ancient Egypt, to the bird with the soul of Egypt. This is the soul of Egypt, which they are wailing and they are mourning during the revolution. So this is as far as Egyptomania is in Egypt. We have plenty, of course, that could be a whole talk. And now outside of Egypt, some people who are outside of Egypt may like it. This is a temple of the Rosicrucian. While all these temples which I'm showing you come from the idea that religion, which developed in Egypt, which is called Hermetism, developed in Alexandria, and I know that many of you are Alexandrian, in the 2nd and 3rd century of our era, and there is a mixture of a lot of Egyptian. It's called Hermetism, from Hermes, Thoth, the god Thoth of Egypt, and it is based not only on ancient Egypt, but also Christianity, Manichaeism, which comes from Iran, Judaism, and it's a mixture of religion, which mixed together and created that. However, what they took to represent in the West, what they took to represent themselves is Egyptian style. This is like the Luxor Museum. And all this is due to Masonic, because the Masonic of the Freemasons, all these are taking many of their ideas from Egypt. It's a very long story, I shall not tell you. I'm just showing you because the lodges, you see all this? You see the debate? All this is ancient Egyptian copied in lodges, Masonic lodges. And again, this is in the French Revolution, they wanted to destroy everything they knew, except Isis, because she is at the origins of religion. So they wanted to transform their religion into an ancient Egyptian religion. Didn't work, but Paris is supposed to be also a name of Para-Isis. Many people say many things. Again, as I say, this requires another talk. This is the Statue of Liberty, as you all know, and it was modeled in Egypt. It was from a text in Egypt, Apuleius, the golden ass, and the man. It was done by a mason. The sculptor who made it is called Bartholdi, and he was a mason. And he first did a maquette, which was like that. And this maquette, he kept only the base. And on the base, there are the writing. Dans la main droite, je porte une torche allumée. Sa tête était décorée d'une couronne de palmes brillantes, dont les feuilles se dressaient comme des rayons de lumière. That was the man who was initiated into the religion of Isis. And when he saw her, he is describing her. And then he wanted he did the thing ended up not to be erected at the Suez Canal entrance, but it ended up to be in America as a gift of France. But Egypt, of course, has a big role in the matter. Now, of course, the French took a lot of all the world, not only France. You have more obelisks abroad. Then you see the Rêve d'Egypte and all. This is the impact of Egyptomania on Egypt. This is Paris. Then this is Magritte. And of course, he is also greatly influenced by pyramids and the soul coming out. And then you have here Luxor in Las Vegas. And I'll show you the last one, which is people are getting so crazy about Egypt that they are tattooing themselves like that. But as I was saying again, thank you very much for your attention. And although this is very interesting, there is no time for it. And thank you very much. Am I on time?
Very much so. Thank you very much. Thank you very much for sticking to the. I'm just gonna stop the sharing here for a second, if you don't mind. Yeah, we'll stop the sharing. And before what we're going to do, if you don't mind, everybody, is before we open it for questions, we are actually quite honored today to have with us Dr. Hourig Sourouziane, who is another renowned Egyptologist, and she's going to be making some commentaries on the discussion that Dr. Fayza has just shared with us. Really quite interesting and amazing points in which the culture has withstood the test of time and continued with us for such thousands of years. Dr. Hourig Sourouziane is a member of the German Archaeologists Institute. She has way too many responsibilities and titles, again, for me to mention, but it is important to note that she has been living in Egypt since 1974. Since 1998, she is the director of the Colossi of the Memnon and Amenhotep III Temple Conservation Project in Luxor. She has lectured in AUC, Sorbonne, Munich, Vienna, and she's also the advisor to the Armenian embassy, cultural advisor to the Armenian embassy in Egypt. It's really quite an honor to have you with us, Dr. Huring, and I would just ask you to share with us your thoughts in here, and then we'll open it up for discussions regarding what Dr. Fayza had shared with us. Dr. Huring? I'm hoping your microphone is open. Can you open your microphone?
Yeah. Do you hear me?
Yes, we can hear you now. Please go ahead.
So first of all, good evening to everyone, and thanks for inviting me to share this extraordinary evening with an extraordinary lady, Professor Fayza Hailkal, whom I always have admired. We know each other since a long time, and Fayza, thanks for this exciting, extraordinary talk, which shows to the ones who know and to those who ignore, with your charm, your knowledge, your beautiful speech, your poetry, your images, the continuity of traditions in ancient Egypt. Brava. You have done always a very good job in everything, teaching, writing, and sharing your great ideas with everyone. Thanks a lot.
Thank you. Thank you very much. I'm deeply touched.
Okay.
Yeah, so I don't know how I can unmute myself.
Thank you very much. Thank you very much, Dr. Hurig. Much appreciated. So if we can stop the sharing, I guess now of your screen. You're not going to be using your screen, right? Okay. So we're just going to open the questions now, and I'm just going to ask people to avoid this microphone thing and opening the microphones and close it. Please write your questions on the chat, and we are going to pose them to Dr. Fayza and have her comment on them as we go along. Dr. Fayza, there are already a couple of questions that are there in there. The first one is talking about all the Egyptian artifacts that have been, I don't know, stolen or transferred or whatever it is that you want to say that are around the world outside of Egypt. Is it important to bring them back to Egypt? And if it is, how can that be done?
Very difficult. Very, very difficult, although I believe today that they should come back, because not everything, there is a lot which has come out legally. So whatever came out legally is fine. I cannot discuss it. It's legal. It's over there. It's fine. But a lot of things have been, I will call things by their name, and they have been stolen. And there still are things which are stolen. And this is very, very sad, because whenever something is stolen, the irony is that they know the place, they know what they want, and they commission people to steal it and to cut it from the walls for them. So they are destroying the wall, the part they want to take, and the whole part around it, because in order to cut something out of the wall, they don't even do it very cleanly. And this is really a drama, in my opinion. And I think this is unforgivable. Now, before, years ago, I thought, well, we do not have enough space to take care of all that. But now we do have, with all the new museums that we have, great museums, inshallah. And I think we have enough space to take care of our own things and enough knowledge today to do so. This is one part of the equation. The other part is that when things are there, unfortunately, they are appropriated by whichever country is using them. And they are not only using them, but they are abusing them by making money out of their presence there. For example, we have the head of Nefertiti. The head of Nefertiti, which is in the Berlin Museum, came out of Egypt illegally. It was literally hidden in the baggage of the person scholar, he's a scholar, this is why I don't want to mention him, because it's shameful that a scholar do such a thing. And then now it's in Berlin, it's very difficult to bring it back, and they are appropriating it and they are making it the symbol of the city, if you want to know. So this is a second reason. The third reason is that a lot of the stuff which was stolen when Egyptian Egyptology was not really strong or non-existent at the moment. But those which are abroad, and I am not saying they're not taking well care of them, they are taking care of them very well, and I thank them for that under many circumstances. But very many things out of that losing. An object, Egyptian object, is not there only as an aesthetic, beautiful object. It represents something, it means something, it's part of a totality, and it should not be taken away from this totality, that's one thing. It should not be appropriated by someone else, although anybody who has some common sense would recognize an Egyptian object anywhere in the world. It would not change its nationality. But still, I think we have reached a time now when we should write and reinterpret our objects according to the Egyptian mentality as well. I don't say that the knowledge that we have is bad or wrong. I just say that it is incomplete and can be disputed.
Okay.
And this is what my answer.
Okay, thank you. We have a couple of other questions, and I'm sure more are going to come in. Please write them on the chat because it's going to take time to open and close microphones. So please go ahead and write them on the chat. There's an interesting question that came after that. With all the continuity of the culture that you've talked about in this very interesting presentation, why is it that there is no national Egyptian dress that has survived? I mean, we do some sort of pharaoh stuff for our clothes just for fun, but there is nothing in the clothings of Egyptians today that connects with the Egyptians in the past. So the question is, why has that not survived?
Well, I will not be 100% there are a few things in the countryside that are Galabeya. You know? Galabeya is Galabeya. And the Egyptians wore also Galabeya, not what they represented, because they represented themselves always well dressed and as good as possible. But if you go look at the clothes in the museum, you will find that they have Galabeya. That's one thing. The other thing is that Egypt is one of the countries which has changed, how shall I say, we have been invaded so many times, and we have been influenced by so many people, which have, in my opinion, enriched our culture, but we are not, there are things which are easier to change than others. Our beliefs, our superstitions, our traditions have not been changed very much. Even the language, we have spoken about ancient Egyptian words in the Egyptian language, but there are also other words which came into the Egyptian language and which are here, from Persian origin, Turkish origin, Greek origin. Coptic, for example, has very, very many Greek words. Coptic is ancient Egyptian written in Greek characters. Like Ataturk made the Turks write the language. Instead of writing it in Arabic, they wrote it in Latin character. The Greek made the same thing when they, under the Ptolemies. So Coptic is this stage of the Egyptian language. It's the last stage of the Egyptian language, which has a lot of foreign words in it, Greek essentially. Okay. So, but the clothes is the same. It's easier to change. It's more practical. We are all wearing jeans and pants now. So I think this is the only reason I can give you.
I'm going to just throw in an additional question for me here on the clothing. Someone was always asking, why do we always see them wearing summer clothes? We always see the men sort of not wearing clothes on top in the top half. Why do they never wear warm clothes? Was it always warm, or is this just the way they portrayed themselves?
I think this is just the way they portray themselves, again, because sometimes you have them wearing it. Abaya, as we say in Arabic. So it's it's a kind of coat, but it doesn't. They don't. They just bind it with a belt and things like that.
Okay.
And sometimes they have it, and sometimes it's a mark of status.
Okay. So I guess there's a question here about Sham al-Nisim, because you have not mentioned that as a continuing habit, and I guess Egyptians see it as something that they celebrate with Easter every year.
I know. Yeah, but I didn't mention it because every year I hear this story. I agree that it has similarities with it is a festival which is celebrated in Egypt to celebrate spring, really, spring and greenery and life. In ancient Egypt, it was the same thing. They celebrated spring and greenery and life. But and they had colored eggs and they had fesir. So there could be something. But I do, in order to say it officially, professionally, I have to have the link and say how it works. And some people tell me, what is Sham al-Nisim? Is it Arabic or is it has a root? Even the name Sham al-Nisim. Of course, I made a lot of jokes about it, and people believe that it's true, but it's not true. And I told them it's not true. I have to make research about this Sham al-Nisim, where it comes from. And I have certain ideas, but again, as I say, if you respect yourself, and I hope I am one of them, I do not say something if I am not at least 90% sure that it's correct.
But it's and the part where the Christian celebration of the Easter Sunday, or not Easter Sunday, Had the Zaf, when they carry the plants that are weaved together, is that not part of the Pharaoh's traditions?
I think this is Christian.
This is pure Christian.
It's Christian, but I'm not sure. Yeah.
Okay. So there was one other question, which I find very interesting, about the Egyptomania, whether Egyptians value their own history as much as it is valued internationally. It seems that when in many cases people when see how foreigners are totally blown away by some of the Egyptian history, and you see how the museums, when they have like exhibitions on Egyptian and on Egyptian ancient Egyptian culture, people there are just in complete awe. And I think many Egyptians look at it and say, okay, why are you so impressed? The question is it true that Egyptians don't really value their own history as much as others tend to value it? And is that common, that the people of the same culture?
Yes, it is true, but I will make a comparison, maybe to bring the idea more vividly in front of your eyes. If you inherit from your parents nice pieces of furniture that are in your house, while you get used to them, and you don't think of their value or their beauty anymore because they are here, they are beautiful, yes, you know, but you are sitting on the chairs and you are sleeping on their, and you can even put your feet on the chairs, etc. But the problem is that when you receive guests, they will tell you, oh, what beautiful thing you have. Look, this is mashrabeh, this is this and this is that, because they don't have it. But we are so used to having it, and it is so close to us that we do not realize really the value of the thing.
Okay.
And unfortunately, and very unfortunately, as long as it doesn't pay money, it is not valued. People are, very unfortunately, lack of education, appreciated what to them costs a lot of money.
Okay.
This is true.
Yeah, it's just I think we have 4 or 5 more questions in here. So there's a question about the Freemasons and what exactly is the connection between the Freemasons and the ancient Egyptians. Thanks for a wonderful talk. What's the relationship between the Freemasons and ancient Egypt? Why the appropriation of ancient Egyptian symbols? What is it that got the Freemasons to take the ancient Egyptian culture as a way to express themselves?
Because it's a very rich culture, and it's very religious culture. It's a culture which is the Hermetism in particular, this religion, which, as I told you, grew up in Alexandria, is very rich, and it's the closest we can have before monotheism, or monotheism already existed with Christianity and Judaism and all that. Islam, not yet, but it was the 2nd and 3rd century. And it has a lot, the religion of Isis had been spread before Hermetism, all over Italy, all over Greece, all over the world. Isis was worshipped in Italy and in Greece from the maybe 4th, 5th, 6th century before. They knew her. And from the 3rd century before Christ, of course, they knew her very well. And Rome has a lot of places, a lot of Santa Maria di Trastevere, Santa Maria di, I don't know what, all the Santa Marias which are there in Rome, that are often built on temples which already existed belonging to Isis. As I told you, the place was sacred because Isis had a temple there. And therefore, all this stayed in their mind. And some of the principles of Hermetism required initiation. You know, it was not given to everybody. So it attracted also many people because of the secrecies and mysteries of the religion. And of course, this is a very complicated thing again, and I myself have to read more about it, but it's very interesting in that sense. And you have many Masons, which particularly in the 18th century, Goethe, Victor Hugo, Schiller, any name them, they're all Masons, Freemasons. Even in the United States of America, you have the Egyptian pound, dollar. The Egyptian dollar has the signs of Masonry. The founding fathers of the United States were all Masons. And I am not a Mason myself, but I know that people were very much attracted by it. And all the intellectuals of this period were very much attracted by it. And this is why when you go to the United States, particularly, but in Europe as well, you have all these lodges, which are Masonic lodges, which are very, as I showed you some, very much like ancient Egyptian symbols. Another thing I want to tell you, which is about Egyptomania. Egyptomania is not, it has the looks of Egyptological stuff, but it does not have the meaning. They take they are free to do with the object what they want, but they are not, for example, an obelisk, they don't know what it means. They put it very often in cemeteries, or but it doesn't necessarily relate to death. It's more, of course, it relates more to resurrection, and maybe, but they don't know that. Very often they take symbols, and they take objects and they give them other meanings. And this is why also, maybe this is another reason why Egyptomania is so much appreciated, because you can do what you want with it. It's not science, it's a different science. It's the science of art. You have jewelry, you have furniture, you have food, which are decorated with Egyptian.
Okay.
Yeah.
I'm just gonna, we have several questions, and again, for the people who are raising their hands, I would appreciate it if you can write your questions so that we can go through them a bit faster. On the subject of religion, there is a question that is asking that how did the Egyptians, ancient Egyptians, reach the knowledge that came later in the Abrahamic religion without having any prophets? Like there are no, to our knowledge, there are no known prophets that were registered or like documented in ancient Egypt, but
well, actually,
Akhenaton, for example, and his attempt at unifying the gods, and how they reach the 40 rules of Ma'at, which are the core of any human goodness in our world today. Like, how did they reach those?
Because they have brains and they have ethics, and to build a culture and a society like they had to have rules and regulations and beliefs. Now, the fact that they never had prophets, I think this is wrong. The fact that we don't know who are the prophets doesn't mean that they did not exist. Because from the very beginning, they've learned about God, and they knew about God. and they knew about the afterlife from the very beginning of their civilization. So either through prophets or through their own faith, their own thinking. There are people who have never been taught anything in religion and are very religious because they feel it, because it's grace from God. But I believe they had the prophets, but I don't know, because what they wrote is so close to Sufism sometimes. So they certainly have some people who taught them.
There are a number of comments. I'm trying to read through the comments as you're speaking, and all of them are thanking you very much for the great lecture. There is discussion that we need to educate the younger Egyptians to understand and value their own heritage. A discussion of Egypt being referred to as Dunya, the mother of the world, or as Egyptians like to say, first there was Egypt, then there was history. That the people outside of Egypt adore Egypt. All of these are comments. I'm trying to run through this. James Henry breasted a book, The Tone of Conscience. So they're saying that this is of you, how you, if you want to know how the ideas of good and evil evolved in ancient Egypt, that's a comment on a book that is being recommended. Someone, as a tour guide, I have to say that since the Golden Mummies Parade, the Egyptians are getting interested in their heritage. I see my families in the museum. Maybe we can ask you to comment on the Golden Mummies Parade and what you thought of that as an academic professional, because this had obviously huge appeal to the average person. I don't know how appeal.
Well, no, I would rather let them be happy, and because if they are happy, we are happy.
Okay, good. Okay, I think I went through all the questions that are written, if I'm not mistaken, and we still have a few minutes, so I'm going to try and go through the ones that have their hands raised. There is one that doesn't have a name. It's iPhone. It shows for me as iPhone. If you can please unmute your microphone and ask your question. I think you have unmuted your microphone. Do you want to ask your question, if you don't mind? Okay, maybe we'll get back to that later. There is someone whose name is Sofia Mina Abuna. لو حضرتك عايز تفضل, if you want to go ahead.
I can see Abuna here, yes.
Hi,
Has his hand raised.
hi, Dr. Fayza. Thank you.
Yes.
Thank you very much for your wonderful lecture. My question is, you mentioned something about the birds in ancient Egypt, and you make a connection between that bird and the bird on top of the Pope Francisco, or the birds in St. Mary's Zaytun. What is the relation between the birds in ancient Egypt and what you mentioned about recent time?
Well, the birds, in the human-headed in particular, but there are other forms of birds which are also considered as a manifestation of the soul. Why the birds? There are other animals as well, but the birds in particular, because they fly very, very, very high. And when they fly very high, they reach, they get closer to the gods, the world of the divine. Because according to the Egyptians, the creation is the earth and the heavens, and above all that, there is the sphere where the divine exists more. So the higher you go, the higher you reach and you get close to the divinity. And the soul and the human beings want to see the divinity. So they want to be like birds in order to reach that far up. And by the way, this is not only the ancient Egyptian. There are the Sufi traditions, which are have birds, and in Persia in particular, they have the birds. There is Mante el-Tuyur, which is by a man called Rid al-Din al-Attar, and it's translated in Arabic. It's written actually probably in Arabic because it's an early medieval book, and the same idea is that in order to reach God, you have to elevate yourself. There is also the elevation, the physical elevation and the spiritual elevation.
Okay.
This is why words are so important.
Okay, thank you.
You're welcome.
So there is a comment from Dr. Sally Haney. It says that the Mormons in the US, they claim that their prophet Joseph Smith received the revelation in tablets written in ancient Egyptian. Is that sound like?
I'll give you a
No, I'm sorry, I don't know because I never heard about that. I'm not capable of answering this one.
Okay. Okay, so then we have Fatma Magid. You have your hands up. Fatma, I'm going to unmute you if you want to please go ahead and speak, but unmute your microphone first.
Thank you very much for this, Dr. Fayza, for this interesting talk. I just was seeing some comments about people saying about the values and the knowing of the heaven and hell and whatever by the ancient Egyptian. We seem to keep forgetting that there is an Abrahamic prophet, a very famous prophet, and they call it here Prince of Egypt, is Joseph. Sayyidina Yusuf ibn Yaqub al-Hawa Khan. He was a prophet in Egypt, and he had was spreading the word of the oneness of God and the Abrahamic religion. The other point is, a few years ago, I attended a lecture. I don't know if Dr. Taysir was there. It was about a PhD thesis, and more. This lady who was discussing it is about a scroll that was found in ancient Egypt that is sort of truncated, and it was like almost a prophet talking to God about something, and they were trying to find out the origin. And I may believe that it is either a prophet before Joseph and Abraham, or it might have been Yusuf's scroll. So there were prophets, and there were stories about.
Where does Prophet Joseph fit within the history of the pharaohs? And would one say that he was the first known prophet? As you said, there might have been prophets that we don't know of.
I'm sure there was. Personally, I'm sure there was, yes. And then there is something which is a bit difficult to explain. It's mixing up religion, biblical religion and Islamic religion with the Egyptian documentation. For example, you mentioned Yusuf, Sayyidina Yusuf, Sayyidina Musa, Sayyidina Ibrahim. Well, apart from Musa, who has a name which is Egyptian, Musa in Egypt means al-mawlud, the one who is born, the baby. So apart from him, the other names do not exist. We don't know him. We don't know, and Musa was a common name, Ramses. The Ramses means Ra Musa. We say Ramses because the Greek were saying so, but Tahut Musa. All these Musa are the name of Musa, together with the name of the God. The God gave him, caused him to be born, and so on. So the documentation, the Egyptian documentation, the text that we have, do not have anything that is talking directly about these prophets. That's number one. Number two, it doesn't mean that it did not exist, because there are, as you have noticed, discoveries every day in Egypt. Science is not stopping. So we don't know what's going to happen. We may get more, we may not get more. But at the stage where we are, we have nothing which proves that on paper that these prophets in particular were there. This is why I say they were prophets in Egypt. That's for sure, because of the refinement of their religion. But who they are, I don't know.
I think we're going to take the very, very last question now, because Adel had his questions from the beginning and I wasn't opening the microphone. Adel, please go ahead and open your microphone. You're going to be our last question.
Okay. The question I have is, again, I go back to the religion issues. There's a prophet called Idris, and I'm not sure how it relates to the ancient Egyptian.
Yeah, some people say Osiris.
Okay.
Some people say that Idris is Osiris.
Okay, that's very good. And what you said about some of the prophets,
I say some people say, Wallahu a'lam.
Allah alam, but in the Quran, there's a chapter in the Quran that said there are prophets that you have been told about, and there are prophets that you don't know of.
Exactly.
So that confirms what you said. And the last question I have is, what's your comments on the story of the Exodus of the Jews from Egypt, and how come there's no any proof of the Exodus on any of the ancient Egyptian tombs? And how come when Israel occupied Sinai, they tried to find any traces of the Jews in the Sinai and they found none?
Okay.
Well, this is a very, very political question. To be quite honest, the only, again, I'm talking about documentation. The only document which bears the word Israel in Egypt is referring to a tribe, among other tribes, in the days of King Merimtah. So this is the only written documentation. Anything else is speculation. And you can speculate as much as you want. I have no proof. There are theories, I can tell you. There are some people think that Akhenaten is Moses himself, the latest one I heard. But again, as I say, if you do not have proof, go ahead, speculate until the day of doom. You can do that, but I can't.
So from the perspective of documented ancient Egyptian history on the walls of temples or on anything that we have found, there is nothing that describes Joseph and Moses and the whole story about the Jews in Egypt and all of that.
Yeah, nothing.
Oh,
nothing.
That is news to me. So that is one big thing I learned today. Okay, so I think we are just coming to the end of our time. Before I close, I want to say people are asking, that recording will be posted on a YouTube channel that's called Daughters of the Nile. So please, if you want to share that afterwards, it will be posted on Daughters of the Nile. And I'm sure depending on who has invited you to this event, they're going to let you know. And on that site, if you have any questions, you can always post them in, and we will see if we can trouble Dr. Fayza and ask her to answer them for us in the future. I personally would love to have another session to hear about what the Egyptians did in the mummification. Like, I'm an engineer, so I'm quite fascinated by their knowledge of chemistry and chemical applications, whether it's in the colors that they've used on the temples that have resisted the heat and sun and all the horrible weather effects and still are there today as if they were painted yesterday, as well as the mummification process that they have done, and whether any of that stuff has carried into the current status that we have. And as someone who played or practiced Taekwondo, I personally was amazed when I went in, I think it's in Minya, like the temples, the things that are up on the mountains there, on the walls, they literally had all the movements of self-defense that. Sorry? In Bani Hassan. Yeah, exactly. They had, it was as if the book I have studied from was photocopied from the pictures on the wall. To me, that was incredibly fascinating, because I always thought that the martial arts originated from the East, from the Far East. But then I saw them right there in
but you know, they could have been no relation between Egypt and the Far East. It's not necessarily taken from us, yeah.
So that's what I'm saying. It could have originated in two different places, but I never saw them as having originated in Egypt. We always learned that they came from the Far East. But I think I will be expressing everybody's opinion now in thanking you very, very much for a fascinating discussion. You've sort of kept our attention extremely well for an hour and a half, listening to really amazing things as to how some things that are so normal for us, they actually come from 5,000, 7,000 years ago, and they have been built into our culture and built into our attitudes, that we don't even think of them as ancient Egyptians. We think of them as practices in current Egypt. I think it's well worth reflecting on our history and on our roots And as was mentioned here, learning to teach the young people to value those their ancestors and value the cultures and take them as role models for them in what they can do and should be able to do in life today. I really, really thank you for your time. Thank you for bringing to our attention how the continuity of history has carried on for so many years. On behalf of the Daughters of the Nile, I'm thanking everybody for taking the time to join us. And hopefully when we do have another in our series of speakers, we will let you know in exactly the same way. Dr. Fayza, my deep appreciation and gratitude for you. Thank you all very much for attending and hope to see you in the next event, inshallah. Thanks, Dr. Fayza. Good night, everybody.